Hello, Master Gitu Yuat. It's Monday, September 5th. This is Africa 54.
In a unanimous decision, Kenya's Supreme Court upholds the August 9th election of William Ruto as president of the East African nation. A United Nations aid agency says the looming famine in Somalia requires a massive humanitarian response, as millions of people have been displaced due to drought. And residents in the capital city of the U.S. state of Mississippi are still without clean water. We'll have a report.
We begin our broadcast in East Africa, where accusations of fraud in Kenya's presidential election have been dismissed by the Supreme Court, confirming William Ruto as president. Chief Justice Martha Koome delivered the announcement on Monday.
As a consequence, we declare the election of the first respondent as president-elect to be varied under Article 143 of the Constitution. This being a matter cutting across the public interest, we order that each party do bear their own costs. It is so ordered. And finally, the court has asked me to also acknowledge, although we'll do it in the long draft, the enormous contribution made by counsel in these proceedings, and also the orderly way the council, all the advocates and parties conducted themselves. They remained seated throughout the proceedings. That is the judgment of the court.
William Ruto, who has been serving as outgoing President Uhuru Kenyatta's deputy since 2013, now takes charge of a Western ally in an unstable region. Mohamed Yusuf has more on today's court announcement, including reaction from Kenyan citizens in Nairobi.
Kenya's Supreme Court on Monday upheld the election victory of President-elect William Ruto. The court dismissed Raila Odinga's claim the election was rigged in favor of Ruto and the Electoral Commission did not follow the Constitution and the electoral law.
Oh, sorry about that audio technical glitch. Kenya's Supreme Court on Monday upheld the election of William Ruto as Kenya's 5th president. This after last week's intense argument from lawyers representing various parties. The 7-judge panel unanimously agreed there was no evidence to nullify Ruto's win. This was Ruto's first bid at the presidency, making him the youngest head of state in Kenya's history. Topping the 7 petitions was that of Raila Odinga, Kenya's veteran opposition politician seeking to overturn Ruto's win, which was announced by Kenya's Electoral Commission Chairman Wafula Chebukati on August 15th. Earlier, I spoke to Kenya's constitutional lawyer Charles Kanjama via Skype and began by asking for his reaction following the Apex Court's verdict. What's your reaction to the verdict?
Okay, so this is going to be the second presidential transition after Kenya got a new constitution in the year 2010. The first was from President Mwai Kibaki to Uhuru Kenyatta in 2013, and this also came after a contested presidential election in which Raila Odinga who emerged second, went to the Supreme Court and challenged the victory. The Supreme Court disagreed with his petition and Uhuru Kenyatta was sworn in. So this is the second time in which we are having a presidential transition, again after a contested election declaration. One of the most important questions that observers were waiting to see what the court would say was on the split between the election commissioners, because a majority of the election commissioners, 4 of them, had disagreed with their chairman, who read the declaration that William Ruto was the president-elect. So what was interesting was that the court noted that the chair of the commission does not have dictatorial powers. He has to act or work with the other commissioners. But nonetheless, they also noted that the 7 commissioners worked together until the tail end of the process, and they did not find any cogent evidence to challenge the declaration of results. So, and the court therefore found that William Ruto was validly elected and was properly declared president-elect. This means that in the next 8 days, on Tuesday next week, 13th of September, William Ruto will be sworn into office and take office as the 5th president of the Republic of Kenya.
Charles, do we know if President-elect has spoken at this point?
The President-elect is yet to speak, but we are all waiting to hear his remarks. So far, we have got remarks from the lawyers for both William Ruto and Raila Odinga spoke. Those for William Ruto welcomed the verdict. They were very excited about it. Those for Raila Odinga disagreed with the court decision. Shall respect it, even though they don't agree with the court.
So even with their disagreement with what has happened, this case is closed, right?
So all the parties had indicated before that they'll respect the court's outcome. In our constitutional dispensation, the Supreme Court, which is the apex court in Kenya, its decisions are final. So the parties have affirmed that they accept, in that sense, they respect the court's decision that it has brought to an end the election period in Kenya. And those who are not happy with the court's decision, they say they're exercising their democratic right to have a free opinion on whether to agree or disagree with the decision. But they are upholding the fact that the court has the last word constitutionally.
Now, what's next for Mr. Odinga after this 5th bid at the presidency?
So this was the 5th attempt for Raila Odinga to become the president of Kenya. He is reported to be 77 years old. We have 5-year term of presidency, and so in 2027, when we anticipate our next elections to be, he's likely to be 82 years old. Several observers believe that this might be his last bullet, using the terminology that has become popular here in Kenya, and that he'll have to reflect on the way forward. In the statement that he has issued, he had said that his struggle for democracy, transparency, and accountability is continuing, and in the days ahead, he will be engaging those who are aligned to these values and principles so that they can reflect on the way forward so that they can keep the fire burning.
What does the Supreme Court ruling say about Kenya's judicial system?
So Kenya's Supreme Court has had 4 occasions to determine presidential election petitions in the last 9 years. Because this is our 3rd election, and in 2017, we had 2 presidential elections after they nullified the first one. Their current record is a 75% record of upholding the verdict declared by the Electoral Commission and a 25% record of rejecting that verdict. And so, taken from this perspective, the Supreme Court has affirmed its independence and its authority, both against the government of the day and also against the strong opposition that has been popular in several parts of the country. They have, on previous occasions, decided with a split verdict. In 2017, it was a 5-2 decision when they nullified the result. Today, it is a unanimous 7 nil verdict in favor of upholding the results. The Deputy Chief Justice indicated that several people attempted to make calls to the judges. They turned off their phones so that they could focus on the job at hand without any kind of influence. And I think that was yet another indication that the judges value the independence and authority and integrity, and the lawyers who were in court for all the parties recognized and appreciated the work that the court did, the diligence, the effort, and the fact that they independently applied their mind to the issue without any covert or overt influence.
Charles Kanjama, thank you very much for joining us on Africa 54 today. Kenyan constitutional lawyer Charles Kanjama speaking to me earlier via Skype from Nairobi. We want to update you that President-elect William Ruto has already addressed the media in Kenya. For more analysis on Kenya's politics and this historic day, I'm joined live via Skype from here in Washington by Professor James Gundi of Georgetown University. Professor, welcome again to Africa 54.
Thank you, Esther.
Let me start you with a loaded question on what this petition means for future Kenya's elections, the Electoral Commission preparedness, and voter education.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I think there is a lot to be learned from this election. And also going by and listening to the judges of the Supreme Court, clearly one of the things that has worried Kenyans and clearly worried the Supreme Court judges was the dysfunctional nature that the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission displayed, especially during the final days of the tallying and verifying of the votes. So I think going forward, there is going to be a lot of work, and the judges did, the Chief Justice did mention that there is need for work to be done to make sure that we have a credible and a reliable IEBC or Election Commission that can produce and give Kenyans credible, reliable, and trustworthy election results every 5 years.
And given what you know as a Kenyan native on politics of ethnicity in the country, what does President-elect William Ruto need to do to harmonize the country?
One, I think there's something to be said about the politics of ethnicity this time around. I was in Kenya the last 3 weeks leading to the election. In fact, I left Kenya the evening of the election. And one of the things that was very salient, different from past elections, was you didn't hear ethnicity play as big a role. In fact, you hardly heard ethnicity as a factor in this cycle. And this is because of the role of coalitions. And maybe that is something to be cultivated going forward, not just in Kenya, but perhaps across the African continent. Coalitions that bring together people of different ethnic backgrounds. Because with that, the role of a singular ethnic group and its importance in the election is minimized almost to zero. And so this time around, it was interesting just hearing people talking about the coalitions that were made up of people, leaders from different ethnic backgrounds. And so going forward, hopefully, that is a page we will take and expand and even improve on, so that in future elections are based on groups, different groups of different ethnic peoples, as well as ideas and policy positions rather than tribes.
Given that Mr. Odinga will be 82 in 5 years when Kenya goes to the presidential polls again, what role do you think he is going to play in the opposition during this 5-year term of William Ruto?
I liked the reference your previous guest used of spent bullet. And I actually think for most Kenyans, but perhaps the reason we see Kenyans taking the loss, even Raila's own supporters taking his loss, not as hard as in the past elections, maybe because of that recognition that Raila is an elderly person today. And I think for most Kenyans, they would want to see Raila retire from politics as an elder statesman who provides guidance to the country how to secure our democratic tenets that are espoused under the 2010 Constitution. And even if he remains active, not necessarily in active elective politics where he runs for office. So hopefully this will be a time for Raila to start nurturing younger politicians to learn from him in terms, especially in terms of opposition politics and what opposition politics means in a democratic society.
Professor, quickly, name 2 sectors that President-elect William Ruto needs to address in terms of the economy.
Well, in terms of Kenya's economy, there's no question that the agricultural sector will always be, the bulwark of our economy, and there has been a lot of neglect in that part of the economy. So I'm hoping that is going to be a central focus of the new administration coming in. Right. It's not necessarily a part of the economy, but we always talk about fighting corruption because of the amount of money that we lose through corruption. And I really hope that Kenyans will be willing to change their culture and be willing to fight corruption if the country is to see the development that most Kenyans want to see in the future.
James, thank you for your insight. James Gundi is a professor at Georgetown University. And here's more on what President-elect William Ruto is planning to do once he is sworn in. Here's David Doyle.
Kenya's Deputy President William Ruto says he'll publish government contracts with China and deport Chinese nationals working in the country illegally. The policies are designed to appeal to citizens pummeled by mounting debt and a skyrocketing cost of living.
We will put the brakes on more borrowing. It may not come to zero, but we will begin the journey to slow down on borrowing. Because they say when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging.
Kenya, which has a 2022 to 2023 budget of just under $28 billion, has a deficit of 6.2% of GDP and owes China about $8 billion. That debt has funded an infrastructure building spree under President Uhuru Kenyatta. The contracts are not public, and some Kenyan organizations have lodged court cases to try to force full disclosure of the deals. Ruto says his is an economic platform.
But that economic platform includes public resources, which means we have to tackle corruption head on, right? And in fact, in this election, we are probably the only team that has a plan on how to fight corruption.
William Ruto is to be sworn in on Tuesday, September 13th. David Doyle of Reuters filed that report. Now to Somalia and the drought crisis. United Nations humanitarian chief Martin Griffiths visited Baidoa in Bay region, the epicenter of the hunger crisis gripping Somalia. As famine looms and the drought worsens, 7.8 million people, nearly half of the country's estimated population, are in need of humanitarian assistance. Griffiths says hundreds of thousands of people are at imminent risk of death if the international community does not act swiftly and immediately. He says many lives are being wrecked.
What's happening in the Horn of Africa is a threat to a way of life which has sustained families and communities for generations. It's not just a lack of rain for 4 seasons. For many families, it's an end to the way they've lived. We have to help them live again in any way possible.
Griffith fears that the worst is yet to come in Somalia, and he is worried that some people feel they don't have a future. A climate expert agrees with Griffiths and says time is running out to save people in drought-stricken Somalia. Gulaid Artan, director of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development and Application Center, says the severe drought endangers an estimated 20 million people in one of the world's most impoverished and turbulent regions. At least 1 million people have been displaced by the drought, and widespread deaths are being reported. Hungry families are staggering through parched terrain in search of assistance, and many are burying their dead along the way. Even when they reach camps outside urban areas, they find little or no help. Artan says the situation is dire.
To give you an idea of how bad the situation is, the drought of 2010-11, that was responsible on estimate the death of around 250,000 Somalis, was only due to 3 failed rainy seasons. So this is going to the 5th. Our hope is that the international community, central government will come to their help, because actual time is running out on a lot of people.
Somali authorities say they have not received adequate funding from international donors that have turned their focus on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Somalia also sourced at least 90% of its wheat from Russia and Ukraine before the war, and have been hard hit by the steep rise in food prices. Still to come, residents in the U.S. state of Mississippi struggle to find clean water. We'll have a report.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
In other African news, Zimbabwe's health ministry says that the death toll from a measles outbreak has risen to nearly 700 children, prompting calls for mandatory vaccination. 2 people are dead in Nigeria after a 7-story building under construction collapsed in Lagos. Rescue efforts are ongoing to find survivors. And Conservative Liz Truss, who will become Britain's next Prime Minister, faces a perfect storm of issues, including soaring inflation and energy bills, strikes, and the war in Ukraine. Residents in the capital city of one of the poorest U.S. states are still without clean water after major flooding in Jackson, Mississippi. The city's primary water treatment plant failed. Critics say the issues run deep in the predominantly black city, which historically has endured racism and is now wrestling with the water crisis. VOA's Arashar Basadi has the story.
Members of the National Guard hand out much-needed drinking water to residents of Jackson, Mississippi. Recent heavy rains and flash flooding plunged parts of this southern state underwater. The city's water system partially failed, and the more than 160,000 people living in Jackson, the majority of them African Americans, have had to take matters into their own hands, boiling the water they can get from their pipes. Last week, Mississippi's governor declared a state of emergency as residents lined up for clean drinking water.
I want to personally thank our National Guard service members who are out there staffing these sites and making this operation possible. The service of these individuals is truly critical to the success of this effort.
Reeves said nearly 3 million bottles of water had been handed out in Jackson at the time of his news conference. Residents had already been under a boil water notice since July in a city with questionable water infrastructure and increasing threats to its stability.
We're seeing not only the age and the wear and tear on our system, but we're seeing the effects of climate change. We have colder winters, hotter summers, and more annual precipitation, and all of that is taking a toll on our water infrastructure.
Officials say water pressure continues improving in Jackson, but the city's mayor warns aging pipes could burst under the flow. The governor and mayor toured the water treatment plant last week, accompanied by the administrator of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA.
Where we are focused right now from FEMA is being able to make sure that we can provide and support the Mississippi Emergency Management Agency with bringing in safe drinking water, bottled water, supporting their operations. But more importantly, bringing in our federal partners that can really understand what it's going to take to bring this plant back to full operational capacity.
While residents who can afford and find bottled water continue loading up their cars, local officials say the ailing water treatment plant needs a more permanent, socially equitable solution, and fast. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News.
And that wraps up our show this Monday. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From the Africa 54 team here at Washington, thanks for watching.